The ceramic mug shattered against our marble kitchen floor, dark coffee spreading like a stain across the pristine white tiles. My mother's hands trembled as she stared at me, her face draining of all color. Behind her, my father gripped the edge of the granite countertop, his knuckles turning white. "Good morning," I said calmly, settling into one of the bar stools at their kitchen island. "I believe you received my letter about meeting your new mortgage holder? But let me back up. You need to understand how we got here. 3 days earlier, I sat at this same kitchen island, though under very different circumstances. It was supposed to be a regular Sunday family dinner, the kind my mother had insisted on ever since my sister Victoria and I were children. But lately, these dinners had become more about flaunting success than family bonding. Victoria, my older sister by 2 years, had just landed a promotion at her investment firm. She never missed an opportunity to remind everyone of her new title, Senior Vice President of Acquisitions. Meanwhile, I had recently left my corporate job to start my own financial consulting business. "Emma's going through her rebellious phase," Victoria announced that evening, cutting into her roasted chicken with surgical precision. "Throwing away a perfectly good career to find herself." How cute. I kept my eyes on my plate, pushing around the vegetables my mother had overcooked. After 15 years in corporate finance, managing billion-dollar portfolios, I'd finally gathered the courage to branch out on my own. But to my family, anything less than a prestigious title at a big firm was failure. "I'm not finding myself," I said quietly. "I'm building something." "Building what?" my father scoffed. "A hobby business that barely pays the bills? Your sister just closed a $50 million deal. What have you done lately except disappoint us?" The words stung, but I maintained my composure. They didn't know about the clients I'd secured, the deals I'd been quietly orchestrating. I'd learned long ago that trying to defend myself only gave them more ammunition. "Speaking of disappointments," Victoria chimed in, her voice dripping with false concern, "I heard through the grapevine that Morrison Financial is looking to foreclose on quite a few properties in this area, including this house. Is there something you want to tell us, Dad?" The silence that fell over the kitchen was deafening. My father's face reddened, while my mother suddenly became very interested in her wine glass. "That's none of your business," my father snapped, but I could see the panic in his eyes. I knew about their financial troubles. I'd been tracking their mortgage payments through my industry connections. 3 months behind, with Morrison Financial circling like vultures. But I'd also known something they didn't. Morrison was planning to sell their debt portfolio, including my parents' mortgage. "Maybe if Emma hadn't quit her job she could help," Victoria suggested sweetly. "Oh wait, she can barely help herself." That's when my mother finally spoke up, but not in my defense. "Emma, maybe it's best if you don't come to dinner for a while. Until you—" She waved her hand vaguely, "figure things out. You don't belong here anymore," Victoria added with a sneer. "This is for successful family members only." I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the floor. The sound echoed through the kitchen like a gunshot. "You're right," I said, my voice steady. "I don't belong here. Not anymore." What they didn't know was that I'd already figured everything out. The day before, I'd finalized the purchase of Morrison Financial's local debt portfolio. Their mortgage, along with dozens of others, now belonged to my newly formed investment company. As I walked out of their house that night, I pulled out my phone and sent a quick email to my lawyer. It was time to let them know who their new mortgage holder was. Standing in their kitchen now, 3 days later, watching my mother's coffee spread across the floor, I realized some lessons can only be learned the hard way. And my family was about to learn several. "Shall we discuss your payment arrangements?" I asked, pulling out a folder filled with their mortgage documents. "Or should we talk about why you're 3 months behind?" The look on their faces told me this was going to be a very interesting morning indeed. Victoria burst through the front door just as I was laying out the mortgage documents. Her designer heels clicked aggressively against the marble floor, her face flushed with anger. "What kind of sick game is this?" she demanded, waving her phone where my company's letter was displayed. "You can't possibly own your mortgage?" I interrupted smoothly, sliding a document across the counter. "EW Financial Holdings. That's my company, in case you were wondering. We acquired Morrison Financial's entire local portfolio last week. Quite the bargain, actually." My father snatched up the paper, his hands shaking slightly as he read. "This is impossible," he muttered. "You couldn't afford." "What I could or couldn't afford stopped being your concern the moment you decided I wasn't worthy of a place at your dinner table," I said calmly. "But since you're so interested in my finances now, let me enlighten you." I pulled out my laptop and opened a presentation I'd prepared. While Victoria was bragging about her $50 million deal, I was closing one for $380 million. Those client meetings you mocked? They were with international investors. That hobby business you dismissed? It's now one of the fastest-growing financial firms in the region. My mother had finally stopped staring at the spilled coffee and was now looking at me like she'd never seen me before. But how? Because unlike Victoria, I didn't need to announce every move I made. I didn't need your approval or validation. I built something while you were all too busy judging me to notice. Victoria's face had turned an interesting shade of red. "This is ridiculous. You're just trying to scare us. I'll have my firm's lawyers look into this immediately." I smiled. "You mean Anderson and Pierce? Interesting you should mention them. Your firm just lost their biggest client this morning. To my company." The silence that followed was delicious. Victoria's phone buzzed. Probably the emergency meeting notification I knew her firm would be sending out. Her face paled as she read the message. "You," she whispered, finally understanding. "You've been planning this." "No, Victoria. You all orchestrated this perfectly on your own. I just happened to be in a position to benefit from your arrogance." I turned to my parents, who seemed to have aged years in the past few minutes. "Now about your mortgage. You have two options. Option 1. You can bring all payments up to date immediately. That's $43,000 including late fees. Option 2. I begin foreclosure proceedings tomorrow morning." "You wouldn't," my mother gasped. "We're your family." "Family," I repeated, letting years of hurt seep into my voice. Was I family when you excluded me from events? When you belittled my choices? When you chose Victoria's ego over my success? My father, ever the businessman, finally spoke up. "How much?" "How much what?" "To sell the mortgage back to us. Name your price." I leaned back in my chair, studying them. My mother's perfectly maintained appearance was cracking, her mascara smudged from wiping nervous tears. Victoria's designer outfit suddenly looked like an expensive costume. My father's commanding presence had diminished to desperate negotiation. "You still don't get it," I said softly. "This isn't about money. This is about consequences. For years, you've acted like your success made you untouchable. Like your money made you better than everyone else. Better than me." I stood up, gathering my documents. "You have 24 hours to decide. Either pay what's owed or pack your things." As I walked toward the door, Victoria called out, her voice cracking, "You can't just leave us hanging like this." I turned back one last time. "Actually, I can. After all, this is for successful people only, right?" The door closed behind me with a satisfying click, leaving them to face the reality of their situation. But this wasn't the end, not by a long shot. Tomorrow would bring even bigger surprises. For the first time in years, I felt truly powerful. Not because I held their mortgage, but because I'd finally broken free from their expectations and judgment. As I drove away from their house, my phone began buzzing with messages and calls. They were about to learn that I owned a lot more than just their mortgage. The next morning arrived with a symphony of notifications on my phone. Text messages, voicemails, and emails, all from family members who'd suddenly discovered they needed to talk to me urgently. I sat in my office, a sleek space on the top floor of downtown's most prestigious building, reviewing their desperate attempts at communication. Victoria had sent 15 messages, ranging from threats to tearful apologies. My mother's voicemails became increasingly frantic. But it was my father's single email that caught my attention. "We need to meet. Privately." I smiled, typing a quick response. "My office. 10 a.m. At precisely 10 a.m., my assistant led them into my office. All three of them looked like they hadn't slept, quite a change from their usually polished appearances. Victoria's eyes widened as she took in the view, the expensive artwork, the clear signs of success she'd been too arrogant to notice before. "Please sit." I gestured to the chairs in front of my desk. "I assume you've made your decision about the mortgage?" My father cleared his throat. "Emma, we've been doing some research. Your company, it's not just the mortgage business, is it?" "Very good," I nodded. You finally decided to look beyond your own assumptions. Yes, EW Financial Holdings is quite diverse. In fact, I turned my computer screen toward them. We just acquired majority ownership in Victoria's firm this morning. Victoria jumped to her feet. That's impossible. Anderson and Pierce is a private company. Was a private company, I corrected. Your senior partners were quite eager to sell once they realized their biggest clients were jumping ship. Do you know why they were leaving Victoria? Because I've been quietly buying their companies too. My mother's hand flew to her throat. Emma, what have you done? What have I done? I repeated softly. I built an empire while you were all too busy mocking my hobby business. Every time you belittled me at those family dinners, I was closing another deal. Every time you excluded me from family events, I was acquiring another company. I stood up and walked to the window looking out over the city. That building there? I own it. The one next to it? Mine too. The luxury condo complex where Victoria lives? I bought it last month. The country club where you love to brag about your children? I acquired it last week. Why? My father whispered. Why didn't you tell us? I turned back to face them. Would you have believed me? Or would you have found a way to dismiss it, like you dismissed everything else I've ever accomplished? Victoria had sunk back into her chair, her face ashen. What happens now? Now. I sat back down, folding my hands on my desk. Now we negotiate. Not just about the mortgage but about everything. Your job, Victoria. You can keep it, but you'll be starting over at entry level. Mom, Dad, you can keep the house, but there will be new terms. New boundaries. You're blackmailing us? My father asked incredulously. No, I shook my head. I'm teaching you what you failed to teach me, that actions have consequences. That respect isn't just something you demand, it's something you earn. I pulled out 3 folders and handed them one to each family member. These are my terms. Take them or leave them. But remember, this isn't just about money anymore. This is about family. They opened the folders with trembling hands. Inside were detailed documents outlining everything: new mortgage terms, employment contracts, and most importantly, a family contract. Requirements for how we would interact going forward, how we would treat each other, what behavior would and wouldn't be tolerated. You want us to sign a contract about being family? My mother asked, her voice small. You turned family into a business transaction long ago, I replied. I'm just making it official. Victoria looked up from her folder, tears in her eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't know. No, you didn't, I agreed. None of you knew because you never bothered to look past your own prejudices. But now you have a choice: sign these papers and we build something new, something better. Or don't and face the consequences. One by one they signed. Not just their names, but their surrender of the old power dynamic, their acknowledgement of their mistakes, their commitment to change. As they left my office, my father paused at the door. We were wrong about you, Emma. So wrong. I nodded. Yes, you were. Sunday dinner is at my house this week. Don't be late.